Hey guys, today I am reacting to why 50% of Canadians live south of this line. So my guess of that line would probably be like Ontario or like Toronto, that sort of peninsula of Canada, like that reaches down south into the U.S. near the Great Lakes. Ontario, Canada. Let's just see. So yes, it's one of the provinces. So yeah, it's this province of Canada, right over here. And so this area of Canada, this like peninsula that reaches down, I think that would be, I guess, the area where most Canadians live in. The line would probably be over here, somewhere like this region, yeah. And that's my guess anyway, and I think it's right. Because I've looked at like just population of Canadian cities and stuff, and actually it's pretty high in this area, and what with the capital being here and like Toronto and stuff. So yeah, should be interesting. And you know, most the Canadian population lives within like 10 miles or 16 kilometers of the U.S. border. So it also, you know, makes sense. Most of them live like pretty close by, and so that could be that line they're talking about. Should be pretty interesting to get into it, and if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, that would really help out. Now let's get into the video.
This video is made possible by Morning Brew. Start your day by catching up on the top news in business, finance, and tech in 5 minutes by subscribing with the link down in the description. Americans are, but they're really Canada. We all know that Canadians like to pretend they're further north than Americans are, but they're really not, and I'm going to prove it to you. This is the 49th parallel, the longest border between two countries anywhere in the world, and the one that's most often thought of as being the dividing line between Canada and America. It's
okay, so most Canadians live south of the 49th parallel then. That's my guess of that line. I think I've read about this before, so would make sense.
True that most Americans do in fact live south of this line, but so do most Canadians. In fact, roughly 70% of all Canadians live south of the 49th in this land shaded red, but we can go.
Oh yeah, it includes a lot more area than I thought of as well. It probably includes like Montreal, Quebec City, yeah, some other places, a bit of the Maritimes as well, Nova Scotia. Yeah, makes sense, okay.
Go even lower. A full 50% of all Canadians live south of
okay, so maybe it's this line he's talking about then.
This line in this relatively tiny area shaded red. This means that most Canadians live further south than pretty much the entire US states of Washington, Montana, North Dakota, and obviously Alaska too. But I'm not
oh yeah, definitely Alaska.
Done embarrassing Canada just yet. This is the southernmost point of Canada on Middle Island in Lake Erie. Zooming out to view more of the North American continent, would it surprise you if I told you that there are, in fact, more Americans who live north of this island than Canadians? Well, it shouldn't, because there are, and this is how. Here's the line of latitude drawn precisely over Middle Island's southernmost location. Clearly, all of Canada exists above this line, but a surprising amount of the United States does as well, including this tiny sliver of California. If you're from California, you can legitimately claim that some of your state goes further north than Canada's southernmost point does. With the line this far south, though, a lot of America's largest urban areas exist above Canada's southernmost point.
Makes sense, yeah.
Like the entirety.
And this is probably like some of the most well, I mean, they say like with the climate, you know, change and all that stuff, like this is one of the most habitable regions in the US. Especially like, you know, as places get warmer and warmer, these will be like the most habitable. I mean, yeah, I mean, I prefer it up here actually than more down south even, just because I like the cool.
Of Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Alaska, and most of Wyoming, Michigan, New York State, and Massachusetts. Added up together, this means that more Americans live north of Canada's southernmost point than Canadians do, which is
makes sense, honestly. Just the US is such a large population. 300 something million people. Yeah, it's hard to generalize, and there's so many of them, so obviously, yeah, would make sense.
Kind of weird. In fact, approximately 80% of the entire Canadian population lives within just 100 miles of the United States border. But why? Canada is huge. Why do most Canadians live so close?
I wonder if my 10 mile or 16 kilometer statement was right then. It may be 100. I may have been confusing zeros.
To the American border. Well, let's start off with a fact that despite being a continent-sized country that's roughly the same size as all of Europe, Canada's population is small. Europe's population is around 750 million, while the almost equivalently sized Canada has a population of only 38 million. That's less people than live in California, and about the same amount as people who live in Poland. 38 million people can't possibly settle densely across an area of this huge size. And they haven't. Instead, Canada's small population exists in faraway spread out pockets of population like Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and most significantly, the dense urban and industrialized corridor here between Quebec City in the northeast and Windsor in the southwest. Half of Canada's entire population simply lives within this 700-mile stretch of land that includes Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Quebec City. And it's all because of geography and history. As you're probably aware, Canada can get pretty cold. Half of the country is covered by what's called the Canadian Shield, a huge area of exposed rock with only a tiny layer of topsoil where farming is effectively impossible and winter temperatures are severely cold. You just can't have people or civilization without food. So that effectively eliminates most of Canada from ever being able to have many big population centers. Instead, Canada's civilization developed down here away from the Shield, and where large-scale farming is actually possible. And it's possible primarily because of these. The Great Lakes. These are the largest collection of freshwater lakes anywhere in the world by surface area that pretty much act in a similar way as an inland sea does, like the Mediterranean or the Baltic. The lakes soak up heat and cool the air down in the summer.
Makes sense, yeah, they're gigantic. They're the size of, seas.
Summertime, and then they radiate that heat back out slowly throughout the autumn months, preventing the area that surrounds them from getting as cold as the areas that don't. When combined with a frequent influx of warm, moist air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, this does wonders for warming up the surrounding region's climate. So because of this effect, the Quebec City-Windsor corridor has richer and deeper soil than anywhere else in Canada does, and that means that large-scale agricultural farming operations that can support a large population are possible here and almost nowhere else where it's just too cold and too rocky. The climate is so good here that it's even possible to grow fruit in orchards and even establish wineries. But the climate and agricultural potential is only half of the reason why this is where most Canadians live.
Western Canada is probably very good with this as well. Yeah, like Vancouver and such, British Columbia. Very, very good climate. Probably doesn't get as warm, of course. And not just because of the latitude, but also just because it gets all these ocean currents and such, right? So British Columbia and Vancouver is a pretty cool, constant temperature all year round. And those get a lot of rain and just a cool temperature. They don't get too hot or too cold. So it's also a pretty nice temperature. If I had to compare it, it'd be a bit like British weather, or maybe like Seattle, or Portland, So it seems like a lot of western coastal areas get a similar kind of weather, to be honest.
Live. The other reason is geopolitical significance and power projection. This is the St. Lawrence River, and it's one of the most historically significant rivers in all of world history. It contains the world's largest estuary, and for most of the past 5 centuries was the only easy way for the Europeans to explore the North American interior. Historically, European ships from the Atlantic could enter into the St. Lawrence and sail down only as far south as the dangerous and impassable Lachine Rapids here, which is conveniently right where the city of Montreal happened to be developed and settled. For hundreds of years, Montreal was the primary port town on the St. Lawrence and the gateway to the North American interior for ships sailing in from the Atlantic. But over the centuries,
That's important.
Humanity expanded upon nature's limitations. Eventually, in the early 19th century, the Canadians constructed the Lachine Canal across Montreal Island to bypass those dangerous rapids and, combined with a complex series of other canals and locks across the other various lakes and canals that culminated with the St. Lawrence Seaway being opened up in 1959, ocean-going vessels could finally and freely travel all the way between the Atlantic and each of the Great Lakes, which established cities like Toronto, Buffalo, Detroit, Chicago, and Duluth as other important trading ports with access to the world's oceans. This is partly why cities like Chicago in particular became the epicenter of the American railway system.
Makes sense, makes sense.
It's relatively centrally located within the country, and with access to the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence, goods can be imported and exported from here across the world's oceans. Because of all this, a massive amount of lucrative trade has flown along the St. Lawrence for decades, and all of it has to pass through the ports of Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City, increasing all of these cities' prominence and leading to them becoming the top destinations for immigrants coming to Canada from abroad. Just look at the historical population data of Toronto and Montreal. In a single century between 1881 and 1986, Toronto's population absolutely exploded from a town of 86,000 people to a metropolis of 2.2 million, while Montreal went from about 150,000 people to 1.7 million in the same time period. That is why currently about 50% of all Canadians live south of this line, and why around 80% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the United States border. The border that's been closed for over a year now and is finally opening back up again next month. In response to COVID-19, Canada shut the entire border down with the United States to non-essential travel back in March 2020, and they're finally opening it back up again on August 9th after 1 year and 5 months. Which is the longest the US-Canada border has been shut down for since the War of 1812, more than 2 centuries ago. A lot of what's happening today is based on what happened yesterday or last week. As Canada's long border closure with America has finally ended, and as someone with friends in Canada who visited the country often from the States, these events directly impacted my life over the past year. I was literally in Canada in March before the border was closed, and left back to the United States without realizing that it would be nearly a year and a half until I would be able to return again. I wanted to understand why the border closure kept getting extended throughout this past year, and so I began keeping up with the events by reading the frequent short articles that were being posted to Morning Brew.
Oh, okay. That's an ad. That was a long ad. I didn't even know when to stop. But yeah, pretty interesting and explains it pretty well. I mean, I had no idea of this, of course, and I figured it would be the 49th parallel. But I guess, yeah, you can go even lower than that, yeah. Makes sense, though. Let's check out some of the comments. As a Canadian who lives south of that line, the answer is easy. Too cold up there. Not necessarily on the western side, though. But yeah. There are some areas, Calgary. Laughing Calgary. Been above that line and it isn't cold. In fact, it's perfect temperature. I don't know about you though. Yeah. Interesting stuff. Okay. Here's another fun fact. During winter, it feels like 50% of Canadians live in South Florida. Yeah, I've heard this too. Good chunk in Arizona too. But I'm not done embarrassing Canada yet. Little jokes on you, dude. Canadians just like to be included. 50% of Canadians live south of this line. Most people know about this, but what most people don't know, 50% live above that line too. This guy really knows how to transition to responses. Yeah. As a Western Canadian who's never been out of BC, it made me laugh seeing my entire province above the line. And we're warmer than everything below that line and above. Fellow BC person, how was that massive heat wave? Oh yeah, there was a heat wave, yeah. But still, generally, temperature is pretty just average. It's like average throughout the year. It's like a cool temperature. I moved out of South Florida to BC with my girl because she lives here. The funny thing with the heat wave is no one has AC. Everyone at least has AC in South Florida, Cali. Well, I'm from Newfoundland, and there's like a 70th of Canada's population in Newfoundland. But there's a part of Newfoundland, like St. John's, that is like a really nice temperature as well. Like the southern part of Newfoundland, St. John's, has like an excellent climate apparently. It's like just a cool climate all year round. It does not get too cold. It's like regulated by the ocean currents and stuff. The photo of the wine region shown in the discussion about the agriculture in southern Ontario is actually a photo of the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, about 3,000 miles west. The largest farm area producing the most grain and cattle ranches is in the western provinces. Makes sense. Ontario does have a wine region, though it's up by Niagara on the lake. Yeah, okay. I mean, even in the US, a lot of western regions just very agriculturally rich. Makes sense. I'm from the Toronto area, and whenever I go up to Algonquin Park, I feel that I'm way, way up north. But in actual fact, there are entire US states that are north of Algonquin Park. Yeah, true. Let's just check. See Algonquin Park on the map, though. It's like a beautiful area. And let's just check it out. Located between Georgian Bay and Ottawa River in Ontario, Canada. Oh, okay, so this is Algonquin. Gotcha. And yeah, there are states above that. Well, yeah, Washington, Montana, North Dakota. Yeah. I see. Stuff, yeah. And Maine. Interesting. Okay. As a native Michigander, I just love people talking about the Great Lakes. They're so incredible, but often overlooked. True. In Canada, it's all we talk about, because they're all we have. Love how everyone below the line thinks they're the warmest part of Canada. But me in Vancouver laughing at 42 Celsius in the summer and negative 20 max in the winter, with the usual negative 10 in the winter. Because they're near the ocean. Oh, it sounds good for me, except it just gets too hot. But it was mostly during that heat wave, I think. Usually it doesn't get that hot, I think, but could be wrong. I'd like to point out that Portland, Oregon is also above that first drop line, which is the only major metro in all of Oregon. A lot of people don't realize how far north Portland is. But yeah, it gets, it's regulated by the coastal, the coast, yeah, just regulated the temperature there. Yeah, get that oceanic climate. Portland is further north than Toronto, and I'd like to point out that most of this doesn't apply to Vancouver, BC. Portland is not practically on the border. Portland is on the border. Portland's biggest suburb is in Washington. The weird climate rules are usually in the mountains redirecting the cold weather north, and I'm not sure why this is, but all of North America is warm in the west and cold in the east. I'm pretty sure it's not really that. I mean, it could have something to do with the mountains, of course, in that, Rockies area, but also it's because, the coast. That large coastal region, the Pacific, regulates temperatures really well, especially directly on the coast. Okay, it's not so much redirecting cold weather north as it is blockading the Arctic air masses that normally sweep down the plains. Between Vancouver and Portland, we tend to accumulate warmer, wetter air masses because we get moisture from the Pacific that boils up from the southwest. Funnels of the corridor between the Olympics and the Cascades/coastal range It's a wall the North Cascade crest and just piles up and dumps rain on us. When the air masses are wet, when it's dry out air masses, the funneling and pooling effect just turns into heat bubbles that incinerate everything between Portland and Squamish. Squamish? What's Squamish? Probably another city. Yeah, Squamish is a city in British Columbia. Okay, makes sense. Yes. Okay. So despite being way to north, Portland is further north than Toronto. Yeah. Minneapolis is northern too. Is more north though, okay. Okay, so this was an interesting video for sure. And if you enjoyed my reaction, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching.